Francys Arsentiev is the first American woman to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. She reached the top of the world and never came back. Her body remained in the death zone for nearly 9 years. Climbers passed her and whispered a name that would become legend: Sleeping Beauty. Francys Arsentiev wrote to her son that she would soon reach the summit and be back home. But something unexpected happened. Her story was frozen in time until a British climber returned to do something no one else dared: to end her suffering and silence the mountain's ghost. Francys Arsentiev was born Francis Yarbrough on January 18, 1958 in Honolulu, Hawaii, to John Yarbrough and Marina Garrett. From a young age, she found joy and meaning in the outdoors. Nature called to her in a way few others understood. Francys was unusually quiet as a child. She would often wander off into the woods alone for hours, returning with rocks, pressed leaves, or drawings in her journal. She once wrote, "The silence of the trees makes more sense than the noise of people." At just 13, she climbed her first peak in the Rockies, alone. Not because anyone told her to, because she needed to know what was up there. That daring independence stayed with her. Friends described her as still water with fire underneath. She could sit for hours without speaking, just listening. But when she did speak, about philosophy, nature, or mortality, it was with deep feeling and clarity. She believed in reincarnation and the idea that climbers were called to mountains for spiritual reasons. After graduating from Stevens College, she pursued higher education at the University of Louisville and later earned a master's degree from the International School of Business Management in Phoenix. In the 1980s, she worked as an accountant in Telluride, Colorado. But her passion was not in numbers. It was in the mountains. That passion took form when she met Sergei Arsentiev, a skilled Russian mountaineer with several 8,000-meter climbs behind him. He was not just an accomplished climber. He was deeply methodical, quiet, and intensely focused. Raised in the Soviet Union, Sergei had earned a reputation in Russian climbing circles as a man who respected the mountains as much as he challenged them. He had summited some of the world's most dangerous peaks, often without fanfare or publicity. They met in the early 1990s during a climbing event in the Caucasus Mountains. Francys was immediately drawn to his calm strength and the quiet wisdom that comes from a life lived in thin air. Sergei, in turn, admired her discipline, courage, and her rare blend of curiosity and grit. Over time, their partnership deepened, not just romantically, but as climbing partners who understood each other's rhythm in the mountains. They trained together, planned expeditions together, and found in each other a kind of shared purpose few people ever experience. 2 years later, they married, bound by love, adventure, and the unspoken understanding that their lives would always be drawn to the heights. Together, they climbed multiple Russian peaks, each journey strengthening their bond and sharpening their skills. In 1993, they ascended Mount Kazbek in Georgia under extreme cold, battling gale-force winds that nearly forced them to turn back. In 1994, they tackled the rugged terrain of Peak Lenin in Kyrgyzstan, one of the highest peaks in the former Soviet Union. Facing a multi-day blizzard at Camp 2 that trapped them in their tent, relying on rationed food and melting snow for water. Yet they endured and pressed on to the summit. One of their most significant joint accomplishments came in 1995, when they became the first to summit Peak Goodwill, 5,800 meters, in Tajikistan. The climb was a logistical nightmare. No established route, scarce maps, and minimal communication with the outside world. But the couple persisted, navigating crevasse-filled glaciers and unstable ridges. Their successful summit placed them in climbing journals across Central Asia. In 1996, they turned their sights on Denali in Alaska, choosing the punishing West Buttress route. Denali's infamous storms tested even Sergei's discipline. For 6 days, they hunkered down at 14,000 feet waiting for a window. It came, barely, and they ascended quickly, battling frostbite and altitude fatigue. Francys later recalled how she hallucinated music in the final push, and Sergei's calm voice kept her grounded. They returned to Russia later that year to climb Mount Elbrus, where Francys became the first U.S. woman to summit and ski both the east and west peaks. Though Elbrus is not technically difficult, the wind chill dipped below -40°C. One of their ski descents was nearly derailed by an icefall that cracked beneath them. Sergei pulled Francys to safety just in time. Sergei had already summited Mount Everest in 1994 via the North Face, the more dangerous, wind-scoured Tibetan route. He had seen Everest's cruelty and its silence. Francys had tried once before, but turned back due to harsh conditions. She wanted another chance. This time it wasn't just about reaching the top. It was about doing it without bottled oxygen. At over 8,000 meters, the so-called death zone, oxygen is scarce. The air holds only a third of what we breathe at sea level. Even resting, the human body begins to shut down. Muscles fail, brain cells die, clarity fades into confusion. Many climbers who perish on Everest do so not because they fall, but because their minds and bodies fail them at the final threshold. Francys knew the risks. She trained methodically, studied weather windows, and ascended slowly to acclimate. She believed in her preparation. Her body was lean and strong, her spirit unbreakable. She and Sergei had spent months fine-tuning every detail, but no amount of training changes the simple fact. Above a certain point, your body is dying, and so was hers. In May 1998, the Arsentievs arrived at Everest Base Camp. They chose the north side once again, slower, colder, more remote. But Sergei knew it well. Their goal remained the same: summit without oxygen. They spent days acclimatizing, moving slowly between camps to adapt to the thinning air. Other climbers noted the couple's precision and quiet determination. They didn't seek attention. They didn't announce their goals loudly. They simply climbed. On May 17th, they began their final push. Climbing past 8,000 meters, every step was a battle. The air was razor thin. Breathing became a conscious act. On May 19th, they reached the summit. No celebration, no photos. Just two climbers, breathless and freezing, standing on top of the world. Francys had made history as the first American woman to summit Everest without bottled oxygen. But instead of triumph, she felt only exhaustion. But something was wrong. There's one mistake that claims more lives on Everest than any other: forgetting that the summit is only halfway. The golden rule is brutal in its simplicity. Getting down alive is the real victory. As Francys and Sergei began their descent in the fading light, they had no way of knowing. They were stepping into the most haunting chapter of their lives. The descent was agonizing. Francys was fading fast, likely suffering from hypoxia and cerebral edema, a fatal swelling of the brain caused by low oxygen. She was barely conscious, her movements sluggish and confused. Her speech was slurred, her eyes distant. As night fell, they were forced to bivouac in the death zone. No tent, no oxygen, no fire, just darkness, snow, and silence. By morning, Sergei had made it to camp, but Francys was nowhere to be found. The realization hit him like an avalanche. His wife, the woman he'd climbed the world's highest peaks with, was somewhere above him, on a mountain, alone and in trouble. Without hesitation, Sergei grabbed an oxygen tank and medicine and headed back up into the death zone. He was going to save her, or die trying. No one who knew Sergei was surprised by this decision. It was exactly what the snow leopard would do. But as he climbed higher, searching desperately for any sign of Francys, he had no way of knowing that other climbers had already found her. and what they discovered would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Climbers from Uzbekistan tried to help. They gave her oxygen. They tried to help her move, but they were climbing without Sherpa support and with dangerously limited supplies. But at 8,600 meters, heroism has its limits. As minutes turned to hours, their own oxygen ran out. Exhausted, frostbitten, and facing death themselves, they were forced to make an unthinkable decision to leave her behind. Before they descended, they did one final thing. They clipped Francis' harness to a fixed rope, hoping it would prevent her body from sliding down the sheer face of the mountain. It was a small act, but one that would later save lives by stopping her from vanishing into the abyss. That same evening, as the Uzbek team made their way down through the wind and snow, they encountered someone else, Sergei. Climbing upward in the darkness, his face frozen with determination, still searching for the woman he loved. They told him where to find her. It was the last time anyone would see the snow leopard alive. What happened next remained a mystery for nearly a year. But when the truth finally surfaced, it revealed the full depth of devotion, sacrifice, and heartbreak in one of the most haunting tragedies in mountaineering history. Sergei made an impossible choice: stay and die with her, or descend alone and try to bring help. He chose hope. He left her with what little protection he could spare and disappeared into the white void. He never returned. Other climbers would later piece together what likely happened. Sergei descended quickly in search of oxygen, Sherpas, anyone who could help. But on his way back up, he likely fell to his death. His body later found lower on the slope, still roped, still geared. He had died trying to save the woman he loved. She became part of Everest's frozen graveyard, a silent reminder of the price of ambition. Climbers who passed her body in the years that followed gave her a name, Sleeping Beauty, because of how peaceful and tragic she looked. 4 days after the couple had begun their summit attempt, British climbers Ian Woodall and Cathy were making their own ascent. Near the summit, they saw a shape half buried in snow. A woman, pale, lips blue, eyes open. At first, they thought she was dead. Then, she moved. She was still alive. They didn't know her name, didn't know how she had survived alone for days in the death zone. Her voice was a whisper, almost lost in the wind. Some said her words made sense. Others claimed they were not of this world. One climber later described the moment as like speaking to someone already halfway between life and death. They tried to lift her, to move her, but at that altitude, their own lives were hanging by a thread. Francis was too weak, too far gone. To stay would be suicide. And so, they left. Her last words were, "Don't leave me. Don't leave me alone, please." Years later, Cathy O'Dowd called it the most haunting moment of her life. Not because they left someone behind, but because of the look in Francis's eyes. As if she already knew. As if she was waiting for someone to witness the end. Her body remained there for 9 years, resting just off the main north route. A visible figure in a blue and black down suit, curled slightly as though sleeping. As climbers passed her year after year, she became more than just a body on the mountain. She became a ghost woven into the Everest mythos. She was a record breaker, the first American woman to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. But just hours after that triumph, she vanished into the death zone. Her presence, frozen in time, haunted the climbing community. She was no longer just Francis. She had become a landmark, called Sleeping Beauty, not just because of how she lay, peaceful, almost preserved, but because of how she lingered in every climber's mind who passed her. Some climbers whispered prayers, while others dared not look at all. Many Sherpas avoided speaking her name out of respect or fear. Her presence became a kind of checkpoint, both literal and symbolic, marking the fine line between ambition and mortality. She was a visual reminder that the mountain was merciless, no matter how experienced or prepared the climber. There were stories of climbers who wept as they passed, and some who left small tokens, a flower, a note, or a scrap of gear. Guides would warn clients not to look too long, not because it was gruesome, but because it was too human. The nickname Sleeping Beauty did not come from her death, but from her stillness, the way she lay at rest, as if merely dreaming beneath the snow and wind. Her story began to echo in expedition-based camps, in documentaries, in conversations between strangers high on the ridge. She was not just a cautionary tale. She had become Everest's most haunting mystery. She was a memory, frozen in place, a symbol of ambition, love, and sacrifice. In 1999, Sergei's fate was finally discovered. A separate expedition, while searching for the long-lost climber George Mallory, found Sergei's body lower on the slope, still roped, still geared. He had tried to return to Francis. He had died trying to save her. In the years that followed, many climbers passed by Francis. Some left small tokens. Others looked away. She had become a haunting presence on the mountain, a reminder of mortality, a story told in whispers by Sherpas and climbers alike. But her story wasn't finished. In 2007, nearly a decade after her death, Woodall, one of the climbers who had found Francis that day, returned to Everest. He came not to climb, but to say goodbye. With the help of a small team, he performed what became known as the Tao of Everest. He climbed to her body and gently moved her off the main route, draped a small American flag over her, spoke to her, and finally let her rest out of sight. He didn't do it for publicity. He didn't alert the media. He did it for peace. He later said, "We wanted to let her go. We wanted to say, you're not alone anymore." Since then, no climbers have seen her body. Her final resting place is known only to a few. But her legacy has only grown. Documentaries have been made, including the 2015 short documentary, The Ghosts Above, and segments in Everest Beyond the Limit. Her story has been discussed in books such as John Krakauer's Into Thin Air, and extensively covered in mountaineering blogs and publications like Outside Magazine and Alpinist. Articles written, and still, her story grips anyone who hears it, because it isn't just about the mountain. It's about the things we carry: love, ambition, courage, and the unbearable weight of letting go. Francys Arsentiev wasn't just a climber. She was also a mother. From a previous relationship, she had a son named Paul Di Stefano. At the time of her tragic death on Mount Everest in 1998, Paul was only 11 years old. While the world remembers Francis for her courageous ascent, her greatest legacy lives on in her son. A reminder that behind every mountaineer is a personal story that reaches far beyond the summit. Paul has mostly stayed out of the public eye. However, in a 2007 interview, climber Woodall, the man who helped remove Francis's body from view on Everest, said that Paul had been in touch and appreciated the respectful way his mother's final moments were handled. Paul never climbed Everest, but in 2020, he scattered wildflower seeds in Colorado on a trail his mother once loved. He called it her second summit. Francis and Sergei were not reckless. They were skilled, experienced, and determined. But Everest is indifferent. It doesn't care how much you've trained or who waits for you back home. It just takes. And so the legend remains. The American woman who dared to dream without oxygen, the Russian man who gave everything to bring her back, and the white mountain that kept them both, together in life, together in death, frozen in time, sleeping beauty of Everest.